Hello and welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast, where today we are joined by seasoned business coach, CEO and mentor Dominic Monkhouse. Dom is renowned for his expertise in scaling tech agencies to new heights. With a proven track record of transforming companies from zero to £30 million in just 5 years, his straight-talking, no-nonsense approach has been a shining beacon for agency owners and leadership teams alike over the past decade. And today I look forward to hearing his advice on the importance of focused positioning for agencies, as well as some thoughts on performance management and why CEOs will fall out of love with their leadership team. Just a side note, this episode does contain strong language.
I am struck by this sort of small business mentality. So let me say, here we are at WOW. I have this amazing salesperson, Chloe. Here's a plan that I would often see in smaller businesses. Let's hire somebody cheaper and shitter than Chloe. And that's my plan for sales growth, right? And if you were Alex Ferguson and you just won the Premier League, you don't go, oh, Wayne Rooney's quite expensive. I wonder if I want to find somebody cheaper than Wayne Rooney. You go, you know you need to build on your team and there's going to be some people coming out and some people coming in. Somehow in small businesses, something like sales, which should be an investment, gets treated like the photocopier and it looks like a cost.
Welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast from the WOW Company. If you're searching for the right strategies, tools, and connections to ignite your thinking and elevate your business, then join us for a fortnightly dose of inspiration. Our guests range from industry-leading agencies and cutting-edge tech pioneers to motivational speakers and executives, all offering actionable insights to help you thrive in profit and purpose. So, whether you're a growing consultancy or an agency leader, this podcast is your source of knowledge and encouragement to spark meaningful change in your business and beyond. Dom, so, as you might have heard, I always like to introduce people with their greatest achievements. I love reading out the long list of achievements that people have got through in their professional career, but I'm always really conscious of the fact that we've actually got a person behind that, and we never get to know the person very well. So would you mind kicking us off by telling us something about you as a person rather than as a professional that we don't know?
It is unlikely that you know that I'm 1/8 Nepalese.
Very unlikely. Amazing.
And that my brother is also called Dominic.
I mean, that's incredible, isn't it?
I didn't know I had a brother till I was 35.
Oh, what? And he's called Dominic?
Indeed.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so interesting. So you met him when you were 35, did you?
I did, yeah. My mother had a child out of wedlock and he was adopted.
Okay.
And up until 1974, there was no chance of either party ever getting together. And then the rules were changed in 74 and they got in touch. So.
And you went, no chance. When they told you his name's Dominic, you were like, I'm sure.
And do you know, so the thing is, there's always a debate about nurture nature. And so I met him, went out for a curry, and his hand gestures were exactly the same as my Uncle Peter. And so you wouldn't have thought hand gestures were genetically coded DNA, but they must be, because otherwise he's never met Uncle Peter, so he would never have known to learn those hand gestures. So, yeah, he was a good guy.
Well, that's up there with one of the most interesting facts, so thank you for sharing. I'm going to bring it back to your professional history now. Can you tell us what led you to becoming a business coach and growth expert?
Look, I've had a long list of randomly unconnected jobs. So I did agriculture at university, and then I was a purveyor of fine knickers and chickens to the great unwashed, working for M&S. And then I went around the world and got a job in IT, and I came back and I got a job working for GSK in sales, selling drugs in Yorkshire. And then I worked for a company selling gold and diamond jewelry, which wasn't connected at all, but was sort of more commercial. And then I ended up in IT and healthcare, doing clinical systems, and then I ended up in Backspace doing data centers and hosting. And so none of these things were connected, but I guess we scaled Rackspace to 30 million in 5 years. Then we did a turnaround at IT Lab. Then we scaled Peer 1 in the UK to 30 million, and globally we scaled it to 200 million and then sold it. And we had sold it in 2013, and in 2014, I'm back in the UK after a stint as chief marketing officer living in the US. And I thought, you know what, I'll work for myself for a bit. So I thought I'll be a consultant. I could help people do this thing that they've done before. And maybe I'll be a non-exec director. Oh man, board meetings are so dull. I mean, honestly, they are terribly dull, or they are dull for me. And also people would turn up in board meetings and they'd bring a presentation and they'd say, look what we've done. Isn't this great? And I said, well, not really. It's not actually very good. And then next month they'd come back and they'd say, well, what about this? I go, no, it's still a bit rubbish. And I found that I was really frustrated that I wasn't working with the people who are doing the work. I was just sitting in a meeting marking our own work. So I thought, well, coaching is better than this non-exec thing. So I gave up the non-exec thing and thought I will do coaching. And turns out the joy that I used to, I mean, the growth at Rackspace and Peer 1 were magic, but actually my biggest joy is if I look back and think, I met these individual people and I hired them and they performed amazingly well in the organizations that we created. And they got much further than their horizons were lower than where they got to, if you see what I mean. Their expectations were lower than mine. And I got real joy out of seeing their progress. And I get the same joy out of working with clients now. And so that's why I've done it for 10 years. You know, I honestly thought it was going to be, do it for a few years until the kids go to school and I'll go and get another proper job. Running another IT company, and more fun. It's just been more fun. It's been the best job I've ever had.
Wow. So, and you've had some really interesting background there. That sounds like
I've had a few jobs.
Amazing. So today we said that we're going to talk specifically on agencies with under 30 people, under 30 staff. So what sort of experience have you got with agencies of that size? And do you mind sort of sharing with us, besides the obvious, the difference between those with under 30 and over 30 staff?
Yeah, look, 30 could be, you might think that 30 is sort of a random number to pick in terms of number of people. But I think that it's there or thereabouts when management meetings start being dominated by why people stop putting cups in the dishwasher. It's the point at which culture becomes a real pain in the arse, or the fact that the founder or founders are no longer doing all of the hiring, or that there's no real clear point at which strategy is hugely important. So I think there are other things that are more important up until that point, and then after that point, it's sort of startup. Think of it as startup to sort of revenue stability. And then from 30 onwards, you're into scale up. And I think the business changes. I think up to that sort of 30, maybe 50, depending on, the structure in the business. It's like basketball, and you've got one or two or three founders, and then you might have another couple of early hires who are actually very good. And in basketball, you only need sort of 3 or 4 players, and the rest of the team can be pretty average. But 3 or 4 star players can carry the team. Whereas in football, everybody needs to be great. Well, not at school. If you remember playing soccer at school or football at school, we only had 3 or 4 kids who were good. So football and basketball were maybe a bit similar. But if you look at professional football, the weakest link player, the team with the best weakest player is the team that ultimately, that determines league position. And so that's a very different model. And so I think about basketball and football as being a major transition. So I'm thinking about these teams that, under 30 people, we're still talking about businesses that look like basketball, because that transition is really hard. My experience, I ran a digital agency yonks ago. It was part of the IT Lab group of businesses. And then I've had a number of clients and over the last 10 years who are digital agencies of that sort of size.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And when it comes to kind of CEOs of agencies with under 30 staff, then What do you think are the most common struggles?
Do you know, I think I have had a number of agency owners bring me up, either close to or in tears. And they say, we are actually being quite successful, but I just hate this job. I hate what this job has become. I'm now doing a load of admin, or I'm just doing a load of stuff that I don't like doing. And I said, well, don't do it anymore. And there's just this pause, and it's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you don't have to do it. And they're like, really? Yeah, you don't have to do it. Like there's Steve Jobs had the job title CEO, but he didn't run Apple. I mean, he wasn't doing payroll and admin, sending out invoices. There were people who did that who worked for Tim Cook. And so I think if it's your business, I think the CEO has to do two things. And only two things. So often I speak to people who are talking to me because they think that what they want to do is hire a new CEO or hire a new managing director. And I don't think they do, because I think that they've started the business assuming that they are the founders. So, all of my clients would be entrepreneurial CEOs and founders rather than professional CEOs. And so I think they've got to create a vision and sell a vision. And so that's what they have done already, because they founded this business. And that's what they need to hold on to. And if you hire another CEO, then they will create a vision and sell a vision. And so you get this sort of tension. And so, look, if they're great at sales, or they're great at delivery, or they're a great, designer, or they're a great, whatever they are, like, as long as you're the person who created the vision and you can sell the vision, then you can win clients and you can attract amazing staff. And if you can attract amazing staff and win great clients, then this business has financial stability and success. And I think the hardest thing is where quite often I meet people who go, I hate sales. And they say, that's the thing I want to give up. And it's like, well, okay, but you're not going to be able to pay somebody £150,000 a year to do that, because you're not paying yourself that already. And it is much easier for the founder or the CEO to sell than it is to hire somebody else to sell the business who's not the founder and the CEO. So, and the businesses, when we scaled Rackspace and Pier 1 in the UK to 30 million, I was still involved probably in every large deal that we did. And so I think, because that's part of creating the vision and selling the vision. But I hate admin.
And that's what we see a lot of, right? Is that a lot of people get stuck in those more menial tasks. I mean, what we always talk about through Bench Press is being stuck in the day-to-day rather than working on that bigger vision. But I mean, what advice would you give to a CEO who doesn't like sales? Like, it sounds like from your experience, that's something that's quite important.
Well, if you've got to 30 people, like if you've got to 3 million, somebody in your business can sell. So even if it's not the CEO founder, then maybe it's one of the other early employees, who almost, they're not a founder, but they've been in the team since it was 4 or 5 or 6 people. Maybe it's somebody there. In which case that's fine. It doesn't have to be the CEO, but the CEO definitely has to create the vision. Nobody else owns the strategy. Even if somebody does own the sales, I think the scaling sales is an altogether different talent or task. And I think often people think that this is, you need loads of people. But again, I am struck by this sort of small business mentality. So let me say, here we are at Wow. I have this amazing salesperson, Chloe. Here's a plan that I would often see in smaller businesses. Let's hire somebody cheaper and shitter than Chloe. And that's my plan for sales growth, right? And if you were Alex Ferguson and he just won the Premier League, you don't go, oh, Wayne Rooney's quite expensive. I want to find somebody cheaper than Wayne Rooney. You go, you need to build on your team, and there's going to be some people coming out and some people coming in. Somehow in small businesses, something like sales, which should be an investment, gets treated like the photocopier, and it looks like a cost. And, if I sit down with people, I say, look, if you doubled your sales team, would you double your sales? And if they say no, then they have a sales problem. and they need to fix the sales problem. And that's either the people or the process or the efficiency. But, or I meet people and I say, how many salespeople you got? Oh, we got 3. Okay. How many are hitting target? None. Why are they still here? I just don't understand. So there's somehow with sales, we put up with a level of mediocrity that we wouldn't put up with anybody anywhere else. If your software developers didn't write code, or your graphic designer didn't do any work, we'd get rid of them. But salespeople, we go, oh, look, I had people say to me, I'm not paying their commission, so it's not really costing me anything. It's like, it is. Because if you had a sales guy who could actually sell, you'd actually be making money. You should, the way I've got a sort of a rule of thumb, which I think about with all employees, which is if I'm charging you out and you're doing work, so there's something that I'm charging you for, which I could directly link to your time, then I want at least 3 times your salary back as income, because otherwise it's just not worth my while. And the same is true of salespeople. In year 1, from a gross profit perspective, I want them to cover their salary in year 1. In year 2, I'm expecting 3 times their salary and commission in gross profit. And frankly, after that, I'm the best people will be able to get me 5 times. So there'll be people listening to that going, we're nowhere near that in our organization, or that's impossible. But honestly, that is, everybody would admit that some software developers write more code, better code than others. And the same thing is true of salespeople. There are a small number of people, actually only 15% of salespeople in the world hit their quotas all the time. And you want one of those. You don't want one of the other 85% of people who will just come up with reasons why they haven't achieved anything.
I mean, but that's got to be easier said than done, though, right? In the hiring process, especially nowadays, finding that, what was it, top 15%? It's got to.
I want people to hire the top 10%. An A player is the top 10. Your aim should be to build a business of 100% A players, right? Particularly if you're under 30. There's no excuse for having B players in your team. So an A player is the top 10% of available talent for a given job at a given salary in a given location, right? And that doesn't mean that they want to be the next managing director. So Jill, who works for us here as the cleaner, Jill is an A player. She loves cleaning. If you go and sit down with Jill, she'll talk to you all day long about cleaning. She brings her own products because they're better than anything that I would supply her with. She even brings her own Hoover because she's a professional, right? And so Jill is amazing as a cleaner. And you need people who are amazing salespeople. And I don't think it's true that talent is hard to find. It's just, sadly, nobody wants to work for you. And so it's not that there's a dearth of talent. It's just that your proposition is poor. So I was talking to John Redmond, who runs a digital agency called Ask Bosco up in Leeds. Had him on my podcast recently. And he's got another business called Mode 24. And it's probably not. It's probably called Modo 25 or every time. I get it wrong every time. Sorry, John. But he was out hiring for data scientists. And people are saying, John, you'll never get anybody to come and work for you in Leeds. These data scientists, they're super rare. He said, I had 35. I could have hired almost all of them. They were all amazing. They only do a 4-day week. Right? So that's his thing, right? It's like, we're in Leeds, so we don't have the biggest talent pool in the world. We're not in London, but we're going to do a 4-day week. And I think you have to do something where it's like, well, how would we make this an amazing place for amazing people to come and work together? And at 30 people, you've got to really get it right. Because when you go from 30 to 100, if you've got weakness in your process, the next 50 people will be awful. And then you've got to try and turn it around. It just gets really, 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 really messy. So, got to get it right.
I'm still caught up on the hiring the top 10%. I mean, just to play devil's advocate here, is there anything really wrong with those people who come in and do a really solid job, but they might not be top 10%, but they're consistent and they turn up and they get the job done, but they might not still hit that best sales in the world sort of quota. Is there really, do you think there's something wrong with that? Should that people not be happy with having consistency and foundation and solidness?
If your goal's mediocrity, if you want to be in Division 3, never get promoted, that's your aspiration, hire those people all day long, be no problem.
And what about nurturing talent? Not everyone...
I don't care what you do with the Blackpool Beach Donkey, it is not going to win the national, right? You have to race horses and people. You have to pick genetics, right? So salespeople, obviously people can be trained, right? But, and is there anything wrong with having B players? Yes, because you're stopping an A player being in the seat, right? And so an A player is 5, depending on the research you look at, 5 to 10 times more productive than a B player. But they don't cost you any more money. Right? So if you think about, if people are listening and they close their eyes and think about the small number of people in their organization that they would like to clone, there is no reason, and think about why you would like to clone them. Often it does more work, just gets more shit done. When they get stuck, they don't come and ask me what to do or just stop. They find a way to still do it. Look, I brief people really badly. So an A player for me is somebody who takes a vague notion that I might share with them, and they come back and the thing that they bring me back is better than I had have thought it was possible. You know, my version of good and what they deliver, they're great. And so I love working with those people. They don't complain that I wasn't specific enough or that I didn't tell them exactly what to do, how and when. So B players, you need to painting by numbers. A players are actually talented at painting. Right. And so, you know, they might look slightly similar, but they're not, you know, because then when your market changes or when a customer asks you to do something, computer says no for a B player, an A player says, well, that's not the right thing to do. I'm going to do the right thing. I know, but I don't have to go and ask anybody. And so with A players, your business moves really quickly. And if you think back to the first half a dozen people you had in your business, then often that's it. And as you've scaled to 30, you've probably, unless you've been deliberate about it, you've probably attracted some people who are really making up the numbers and are just friction, and they're not creating great value, and they're much less productive than the A players you have in your team. So you've got to work out what is it about those A players, which is why later on we bring in things like values and behaviors as a mechanism for helping us recruit. So how do we help businesses? We help businesses clone the people that they want. But McKinsey data says individuals, even at an executive level, at an executive level, were 10 times more productive. So do you have a hobby?
I guess, yeah. I go kayaking. Does that count as a hobby?
So when you're kayaking, your brain will be in an alpha wave state. You'll be in flow, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't do it because you're not getting paid, right? So the reason that hobbies put us in a flow state mostly, and we like being in a flow state, and we do it even though we don't get paid. Even though you're getting wet and it might be cold and you could get capsized or whatever it is, right? And so, you know, people run, they fly fish, whatever it might be, different things for different people. But McKinsey found in a long-term study that if the work that they did every day put them in a flow state, they were 10 times more productive, right? So they get more work done on Monday than the people who are just grinding through it. Those people that you said are solid, you know, an A player will get more work done on Monday than a grinder will get done by Friday. So we use things like Working Genius from the Table Group and Colby, and we test candidates to see whether the job and their personality are a fit. You know, if I need somebody to be interested in the detail, then they're going to need tenacity and Working Genius. If I need people to come up with ideas, they're going to need to have invention. And I can see whether they're strategic or you know, whether they get the dopamine from strategy or from execution. And we can put together a team of people who love doing what they do.
And can I just bring you back to that nurturing younger talent then?
I think the A player thing, the whole thing about, you know, top 10% of available talent for a given job in a given location, right? So we can take a junior and we can say, right, we're gonna develop juniors because that's a way in which we can attract people more inexpensively. We can train them the way they can work the way we want to work, so we don't get bad behavior coming in. Every company we've scaled, we've hired tons and tons and tons of graduates. We might at Rackspace, we had, I think, 50 left out of, about a third of the workforce were graduates. And to get that 50, we might have gone through about 150 because the attrition rate is often very high. Or you could put it overseas. So we've got a client of ours who does back-end admin work for businesses. They're based in the Philippines. And so you get somebody in the Philippines who absolutely loves the work that you can't find somebody to love, right? So there is that. You might not be able to find somebody, or you might have somebody who's got a job and they love some of it and they don't love the rest of it, right? That's okay too. Or, for example, we did some work with one of our clients and there were 5 regional sales managers and 4 of them said, we love doing the one-to-ones, we love doing the pipeline, but we just hate the reporting. And the 5th guy said, oh, I love the reporting. I love Excel, but I hate doing the one-to-ones and I hate doing the pipeline meetings. And it's like, you should do RevOps and the 4 of you should take his team members. And so even within, a team there, you're able to say, hire somebody to do the job that you don't, as a team starts to scale, work out what jobs in the team don't like to do and make it a separate thing. You can do that too.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I guess especially with growth as well, roles will naturally change. And like in that sense, it sounds great when you're able to kind of make it work for everyone so they get the bits they love. But there's going to be times surely where it's going to be a bit trickier than that. Where they're not going to get the roles that or they're not doing the same role necessarily as when they first started. And how does that get managed, do you think?
It's making me sad. I think this is one of the hardest things about scaling a business is I might sit down with a client, or I will sit down with a new client and I'll say, it is likely that you will fall out of love with your leadership team in the next 12 months. Because people ring me when they have a sense that something's not right. And often these things that aren't right are people related. And so, you take a business that's grown to 30 people really quickly, right? There'll be, we had a client who came to us, their leadership team was 13 people, right? Because they'd never got around to telling it. So every heads of department was on the leadership team. Like, that's not a leadership team. You can't run a company with 13 people. That's a committee, right? So they had not had a difficult conversation with anybody. And as the job gets bigger, sometimes you need almost always you're trying to specialize. And so when you were wearing 6 hats when it was smaller, your sort of general skill and ability was okay. And we liked the fact you were a generalist. Now the job's got bigger and is more specialized. Actually, the job is now bigger than your capability. And that's really sad. Often you see people who work together for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it's like they can no longer do the job they're doing. And then we've got to narrow their role. We've got to get them into a job they can do, which they often see as a demotion. But it's just, that's what we've got to do to keep the businesses, keep scaling and moving the businesses forward. Or we might have to hire somebody in over the top of them because they were a great sole contributor and maybe they were sort of player coach when the team was 3 people, but they just don't. The business is growing faster than they are.
That's a very tricky conversation.
Yeah. But, it is almost never a surprise to the individual, right? So the owner or the manager or whoever saying, oh God, this is going to be so awful. And in my experience, I just tend to sit down with people and say, how's it going? The company needs somebody in this role to perform at a certain level. You've just said this is the level and this is you. What are you going to do about it? And they said, well, why? What do you mean? Why are you not going to do something about it? It's like, well, it's not my job. It's your job. And so I try where possible to get the employee to own it and have this conversation about my job is to coach you and support you. It's not to turn up and give you bad news, right? So often these conversations are really difficult because it's sort of, your manager turns up and tells you you're shit. You already knew you were shit. Like, unless you're totally delusional, and the number of the delusional people is actually quite small. So I think turning up and saying to people, how's it going? What we do is we get a post-it note, we split it into 4, and we just write DWMQ, day, week, month, quarter. And we say, okay, for the last day you're in the office, write down, based on what you think our expectations are of you, Chloe, write down whether you think the last day you were working in the office was an A, a B, or a C. And then what about the last full week? What about the last month? What about the last quarter? And so I know what I think your performance was, but now I've got you to say what you think your performance was. Now, we might agree, in which case you might have put C for the last quarter. And I could say, well, Chloe, why did you say a C? And what could we have done differently? And how could I support you next quarter? So we very quickly say, okay, that's great. That's the past. How are we going to manage the future? Because what we need from you, Chloe, is we need an A Chloe in this job. And so in the next quarter, what are you going to do so that next quarter it's an A? What do you need from me? Are you clear on the expectations? And you don't have to look back. You can just very quickly look forward. Or you say you're an A and I go, Chloe, I think we're measuring different things. Because I don't think you're an A. So I think let's be really clear on the expectations and then let's meet every week.
Do you think is that more prominent with smaller agencies where there's maybe less structured performance management?
You mean there's no structured performance management? And nobody's having difficult conversations. No, I think small companies think that big companies are doing this really well, and big companies are just as shit at it as smaller companies. It's just nobody's. And what they also do is they go, oh, big companies, they have an appraisal scheme. Let's put in an appraisal scheme because that'll fix it. I hate appraisal schemes. Don't put in an appraisal scheme. It's much better to. I mean, if you want a great book, then this is a fantastic book. It's The Manager by Jim Hatter, who's the chief scientist at Gallup. And so it's quite a big book, but it's all in there. Everything you need to know about management is in that book. And I had Karen and David on the show the other day. This is another great one. Powerful phrases for dealing with workplace conflict. And it's not about diffusing conflict. These phrases give you the power to have more conflict because you can get out of it if it goes wrong. But Jim Harter at Gallup says 85% of employee engagement is driven by their relationship, by their direct supervisor. Okay. And then he said, of that, the 80-20 rule applies. So if you're only going to do one thing to get 80% of that 85%, you'd have a weekly check-in in 10 minutes. And I bet the managers or team leaders are not having a weekly check-in of 10 minutes with their direct reports. Because, and then, well, what do you do in that 10 minutes? Well, you only do one thing. You praise them for a job well done.
Just praise. Even if that's a struggle?
The aim is to praise them for a job well done, right? Which means, what means we have to be clear what our expectations of them were, right? So that needs to, so I would say the thing that is almost always non-existent at all is expectation. So there's a tool for measuring staff engagement called the Gallup Q12. And question 1 is, I know what's expected of me every day at work. And before you go to question 2, you've got to try and get 75% of your team or your company giving you 5 out of 5, because that would make you a great company. And when we do this work with clients all the time, it's called a job scorecard. So what are the 3 to 5 things that the employee can measure every day, preferably, if not every day, at least every week? So when they get to 5 o'clock, they go, I know whether today has been an A day or not, because I know what the company expected of me and I have delivered it. Only about 30%, 35% of companies in the world have that in place. And the others go home at 5 o'clock and they have no idea whether they had a good day at work or not.
So it's just the art of reflection, really. I think that's a lot of the time people don't necessarily think to reflect on their day, right? I know I've been a sucker for that sometimes, like not actually just shutting down the computer and being like, right, let's go home. Whereas actually thinking about how did I perform today? What did I do well? What didn't I do so well?
Look, it's busy. People get busy. So just a couple of quick examples, one from sales and one from not sales. So the sales performance in this team wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I looked at minutes on the phone, and the top performing salesperson was spending 4 hours a day on the phone, and they were smashing it. They were doing 20% of the sales on their own. So I sat down with the team and I said, 8 hours a day, telephone-based sales team. I didn't say, I can't fucking believe that nobody's spending, there's only one person on the phone for half the day. I just sat down with the team and I said, what do you think should be the minimum amount of time spent on the phone to keep your job in the sales organization? They went away, they huddled, they came back and they said, we reckon if you spend less than 90 minutes on the phone in a day, you should get fired. And I said, well, other than one person, everybody spends less than 90 minutes a day on the phone. So they hadn't clearly articulated the expectation. I hadn't, they hadn't. And we weren't giving them the data. So over the next 3 months, we just gave them the data. So every day it said, this is how many minutes you spent on the phone, cumulative for the day. And this is the stack ranking. So this is that's where you are in the list based on those minutes. 3 months later, people had either left or they were more than 3 hours. And another one is in the customer support team or the client engagement team. And they worked out, we said, look, we want to improve client happiness because it'll drive retention and increase sales. How often do you think we should speak to customers? And they said, well, we should speak to them every month. Okay, fine. That doesn't seem unreasonable, having a phone call with a client every month. Okay, so how many calls a day, how many clients a day do you need to talk to make that happen? Well, we're going to need to talk to 5 clients every day. Okay, that's right. Go ahead and do that. A month later, we were still not talking to anybody at all. Because people get busy. They came in at 9 o'clock in the morning. There's an email from a client. I'll do an email. Because doing an email is much easier than doing a phone call. And they get to the end of the day, they go, how many? I didn't do any. Oh, God, I got sad and I hate myself. So he said, okay, you can't do email until lunchtime. You have to come in the morning, not turn on your computer, pick up the phone, make 5 phone calls, talk to 5 clients. And either at 12 o'clock or when you've made 5 calls, you can do your email. Because there'll be nothing in the email that is life-threatening. And the job is to make 5 calls. And so then people would get to the end of the day and say, I did 5 calls today. Brilliant, A player. And it's just that clarity of the things in your job that we expect people to do. And most of the time they don't know.
So one of the things that I'd really love to pick your brains on, Dom, is about positioning for agencies. First of all, when we talk about positioning, what do you mean specifically? And why is it important to be really focused?
I mean that most agencies have a position which is, we do anything for anybody. If you turn up and you've got a pulse and money, we'll do a thing for you, which is as far away from a niche, dominating a niche as it's possible to be. I think, here I am in Salisbury. There is a best Indian restaurant in Salisbury. So it's not global domination, but the third best Indian restaurant in Salisbury will only ever have people in it if the first 2 are already full. And so as an agency, it's like, who is your who, right? Who's your core customer? Whose problem do you want to solve? Whose problem do you want to be the best in the world at solving? And that could be narrow geography. So it could be, could be by size. It could be, we work with SMEs in Salisbury, and that we are the number 1 agency for SMEs in Salisbury. It could be, we run lead generation activity for tech startups. It could be loads of things. It could be anything, but it has to be something. Because people want to work with an expert. If my mother had a heart problem, I wouldn't be happy to just go to the GP. Well, no, I like my mother. I wouldn't be happy to go to the GP. I would want to get the best heart specialist in the country. Or if I damaged my knee, I would go and find the person that had done 1,000 of these operations and, done all of them. I'd find the expert and say, that's what we do when we buy stuff. We go and find experts and expertise. And when I meet people who have a revenue growth challenge, I don't see people who are scaling their business poorly positioned. So that you can have positioning and still not winning because you've done it badly. But I don't see the opposite. So I assume that it is true that you have to be well positioned to win, because I never see anyone winning who's poorly positioned.
Okay, interesting. I just wonder for those. I mean, I speak to a lot of agency owners every week, and I guess the main things that come up are fear of shutting down other avenues and also not keeping up with the competition. It almost feels like for every one agency that has this niche, there's this agency that also has that niche and also does this as well. So I get this sense of, I don't know if fear is too strong a word, but
I think it's like, let's be as broad as possible so that any revenue opportunity can drop in. And
yeah. Absolutely. And when times are tough, you can kind of understand it. But I just wonder what advice you've got for people.
So what I think is that they don't have a sales and marketing engine. And the fear and anxiety about not having enough revenue, not making payroll is true. Now, I'm not saying you say no if you need the revenue. What I'm saying is that you go to market to attract clients. So, our positioning is that we help tech startups to scale up, or rapidly growing sort of SMEs. But we're helping people go from 50 to 500 employees. That's our journey. But I've worked with schools, I've worked with manufacturing clients, I've worked with people in distribution. None of them were tech startups, and so I have a positioning that I take to the marketplace, which makes sense and drives new revenue. And I would then say there are other clients that I would do business with because I think I can help them. And so those two things are okay. They can coexist. It's just where people do this. They think their website needs to be this menu. Like Gordon Ramsay, when he goes into a restaurant, doesn't he? And he's on page 5 and he goes, there's no fucking way these people can cook these 100 dishes. And it's like, let's get down to 8 and do them well. And so it's just like, who are you trying to sell to? And let's have a few things that we do really well, that we can evidence that we do well. And it doesn't mean other people, word of mouth or whatever, aren't going to come through. But it's just get some pride in being world class at something.
Yeah. And is that what it is for you then when you say that, you're specifically aiming at tech startups, but actually these other schools and whatever it is that you've worked with, did they come through word of mouth? Did that come through, how did that come about for you?
Word of mouth, but there's a tool set that I use called Scaling Up, and so that's the tools that we used at Rackspace and Pier 1 to scale the business. It's a book written by Vern Harnish. And, many of the people listening might have come across Traction and EOS. So, it's, if you're under 30, EOS is fine. When you get past 30, the problem is that there's no strategy tools in EOS. So you need something else, so something like Scale Up. So that's why I use Scale Up and not EOS. But sometimes people will find that and realize that I'm a scaling up coach, and they'll approach me to work with them on scaling up. And so that tends to drive inbound referrals around sort of a speciality rather than my positioning.
Yeah, I see. And so, I mean, this might be too broad a question, but actually, how can agencies determine what their ideal audience is then? How does one sit down and go, right, I'm just going to focus on this?
I've just been doing that exercise with a startup today. So we call it, and we start off by saying, we need to do some positioning first off. And we said, okay, what is the thing that what problem are you trying to solve? In their case, they are a startup called Pego, and they have a platform which makes cleaning companies, solves problems for cleaning companies. So cleaning companies have 3 types of problem. They want to try and grow their top line. They want to try and be more efficient and be more profitable, and they need to try and retain accounts that they've already won with clients. And so they can. There's various ways they can do that. And then Pego comes along, and Pego does all of that, but gives them another option, which is maybe we could have better cleaners who are paid better. Right. So nobody's trying to solve the problem. their tools allow you to pay cleaners based on how good they are as a cleaner, rather than how many hours they've worked cleaning. And therefore, you can have better cleaners, better paid, and the contract can actually be for less money, but you can still make more profit. And so we worked through that today, and then we said, okay, if we're going to sell to cleaning companies in the UK, what do they look like? Well, they're going to probably be in England and Wales. They are going to be between 20 and 200 million turnover. We're probably going to be selling to the CEO. He's a visionary. And then we work through and we say, and what needs does he have? Well, he's trying to drive sales. He's trying to improve margin. What's his enemy? Big cleaning companies like Mighty, who will take a contract at under profit. Like, they'll take a loss on a contract to keep a competitor out. They've probably tried innovation before, because that's one of the tools they might have used to pull to try and compete with the big guys, but it hasn't worked. That's great. That makes them cynical, but also means that they've made a decision in the past, likely to make a decision in the future. So, and then how do we want them to feel? We go all the way through all these various things. How are they buying? What's their buying process? All the way to how do we want them to feel? Because nobody buys coldly, right? If you watch a car ad, it doesn't say BMW comes with Michelin tires, right? Whereas if you look at lots of B2B marketing, it's just a list of features and benefits. Here's a computer. It's got a 375 6421 microprocessor chip, and it's got a 1080p camera. It's like, there's no emotion. That's just a list of widgets, So there's things you're going to say about your product, and then there's things you want your customers to say about, all of which would be emotional. So if we start with the end in mind and we say, what emotions are we trying to get our clients to feel? Then maybe we can try to work out. Customers will say things about us that we can't say about ourselves, right? So it's like, well, how do we then get to share that with people who have a pain so that we can put it together? We might use, so we'll do positioning, we'll do core customer. We might even at a product level use Alex Osterwilder's value proposition canvas. But it's really about pains and gains, and certainly the value proposition canvas is around looking at jobs to be done. Do you know that phrase, jobs to be done? So the idea is that everything you buy is to do a job for you. And there's a great video on YouTube that describes some work that Clayton Christensen did for McDonald's. And so McDonald's did a whole lot of focus groups. And of course, people said, could we have different flavors? Anyway, whatever the focus group said, it made no difference. So Clayton Christensen looked at the data and he said, people are buying a milkshake on its own before 9 o'clock in the morning. Why are people doing that? What job is the milkshake doing for people before 9 o'clock in the morning? McDonald's are like, no idea. So he said, right, we're going to go and ask them. So they went and stood and talked to people who bought milkshakes. And it turned out that these people had long commutes. And the milkshake was competing against maybe a Snickers bar or a donut or a cup of coffee. But the coffee would go cold and the donut would get you sugar all down your front and a Snickers bar would be gone. So they wanted a bigger, thick milkshake, potentially with a thinner straw. So it took longer to drink, right? Because they wanted something that would still be tasty or still be doing a job in 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Contrast that to the afternoon when they had this other spike where dads brought their kids in and the kids would get a milkshake and all the food would be eaten and then there'd be a half a milkshake left because they didn't want to throw the milkshake away. So they wanted a bigger straw and a smaller milkshake so that the milkshake got finished at the same time as the food. But this is just what job is being done and who the competitors are. So like, Black & Decker, back when ties were a thing, a Black & Decker drill in the UK is not like DeWalt, right? These two things are not competitors. A DeWalt is bought by a professional, a Black & Decker is bought by a wife. And so Black & Decker is a Christmas present and it could be a tie or a bottle of whiskey, right? So the job to be done for that Black & Decker drill is not drilling, it's Christmas. Like the wife doesn't give a shit that the husband never does it. Whereas if somebody buys a DeWalt, like I am a professional, I'm going to pay more. This is a tool of my trade. So you look at two drills, two drills are not actually competitors. So at a product level, we do that. But at a positioning level, it's who's our core customer? And if we didn't exist, how would they solve this problem? So we might go option 1, option 2, option 3. Now, and then we want them to pick option 4. And either option 4 is only us and we create the fourth option, or option 4 is let me give another example, right? Electric cars, Tesla, right? I could theoretically sell a Tesla to anybody, but some people aren't ready to buy an electric car. They want to buy a petrol car or a diesel car for different reasons, performance or how far they can travel on a tank, right? Because diesel is for the same tank, you get more miles. And then you've got people who are happy to buy an electric car. Well, you should only try and sell electric cars to people who want to buy an electric car. You shouldn't try and sell an electric car to somebody who wants to buy a diesel car, because you'll never win. But so often it's like, oh, I sell cars. I could sell cars to everybody. Right? That would be really poorly positioned. If you have picked an electric car, then Tesla wants to be the number one electric car. And so that would be an example of that. And then you get into some jobs to be done stuff in the car about that make a car a good car or not a good car.
And with all of this stuff then, there's so much to absorb here. Like when is the perfect time to start understanding what your position should be? I mean, I'm talking from startup.
I think you should do it and review it all the time. People will say they're too busy, right? And I think time boxing is one of those things which is, so if you're the CEO or founder in a business, you should get your diary and you should give yourself a day's thinking time every week. Because honestly, you'll never get out of the grind. I never meet people who, you finish a busy day, you can't do this stuff when you're tired. You have to carve out 2 mornings a week or a whole day and just go, I'm going to think about my business.
Wow. Is that a real luxury, though? A day a week? Is that a real luxury?
Or you can be in as much pain and misery as you are now for the rest of your life. It's nothing. It's like you don't get fit by thinking about going to the gym.
I know. I can vouch for that, unfortunately.
Look, even if you get half a day, it's better than where you are now. A day a fortnight. If you might need a thinking partner. You might need somebody to talk at. You might need somebody to capture your notes, or maybe you just do it on your own, or maybe you just read a book and then you think, okay, I'm going to read a book for half a day, and then I'm going to read several chapters of a book, and then I'm just going to go, what have I learned and what am I going to implement? Because that sort of learning and then execution cycle is just how we get, how businesses become great. Not because they reinvented the wheel on their own, but because loads of people have already had this problem, solved it. That's how you get speed. And people who are just stuck in this cash execution cycle, just got to get out of that. Give yourself some time and space.
I love that. Okay, so bringing this together then for the kind of future for CEOs. So thinking about growth and scaling, how can a CEO who might be listening to this now start to gauge what success looks like for overall company growth, and not just profit, but practically and holistically as well, all together as a big package? What does success look like?
I think profit is a good way to measure it. I think if you look at competitive advantage, ultimately net profit is the ultimate arbiter of competitive advantage.
Is there more to it than just profit, or do you think profit is
I think you got to do something you love doing, and I think you got to find something you can be great at. And really, what I've just described as the 3 circles that Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great. He talks about driving your economic engine, profit per X. That's what is the widget that you make money on. How do you describe your economic model? What are you passionate about? That's sort of your why. Why do I do this? That's not related to money. And then what can I be best in the world at? What's my niche? Who's my whose problem am I going to solve better than anybody else? And I think if you can do those, if you can capture that, if you can be really clear about those 3 things, then you have a strategy. And if you haven't got those 3 things now, then you don't have a strategy. Then all you're doing is spinning around, bouncing from, it's like being on a pinball machine. It just feels exhausting. because once you've decided who you serve and how you make money, then you can then, bizarrely enough, you can then go and hire a team you can hire the best team to do it. And, people will have had in the UK, I think the average age for an entrepreneur starting a business is 42. And they've done like 12 years doing the thing they start the business to do. And so they're really clear at the beginning. And they might nick a few customers from the business that they left. And then later on, some of those businesses leave and they need to win new customers, or they've hired a few people and we need to grow. And that's where having positioning and strategy, business nailed down because then you can execute. You can go, well, if this is what we're trying to achieve, this is what we do next. The clients who are here today, like there are a couple of hundred companies that might fit their profile. Okay, if we get that list, what would a top 100 be? That's 500, maybe 500 contacts in that business. What's the messaging? How do we go and talk to them? Direct mail, email, phone call. How are we going to go and talk to them so that we can win 20 bits of business in the next 90 days? Right? That's the goal they've set themselves. And often I speak to people and I say, what's your new business target? And they give me a value. It's like, yeah, but how many customers is that? What's your average spend per customer? And they go, I don't know.
Do you think people why do you think people avoid doing that? That extra bit of work to figure out how many they need to reach out to or to hit that profit?
I don't know. It's either because they don't know to do it, because it really does makes it so much easier when you take away, have you got recurring revenue? Yes. Okay. So you've only got this gap here. How many customers is that? It's 5. Okay. So you've 5 net new customers next year. Where are they going to come from? If we had a list of 50, we could probably land 5, right? And having a list of 50, then to me, it means I can get my hands around it. I've got a plan I can execute, whereas I'm hoping for £1 million more revenue. It's like, you see, that goes back to this fear about how wide is the funnel, right? So to me, as soon as I have a plan, I can execute the plan. I can find out whether parts of my plan, whether my assumptions are right or wrong. I can learn and adapt. Whereas the other one is just sort of hoping, which feels fearful, right? Immediately, I'm not in control and I'm fearful. Or I think maybe they don't want to do the work because when they do the work, they realize that that their plan's rubbish. And so they're almost in denial. Our goal is to grow by £1 million. Okay. And if they just leave it like that, there's no more work to be done. Whereas if they then had to dig into it, they'd realize that they don't have a plan.
So the key is a plan. Have a plan, something that you can work toward.
Planning that's valuable, right? Which comes back to the time, right? So if you've got half a day or a day, half a day or a day a week, you've got time to do some planning, right? Like, where are we? Where do we want to go? You can create an aspiration. You can build a vision that you can then sell. Also, what I find that this is the other thing about having a day in the diary every week that you're not doing the day-to-day job, is that something will crop up. Like, you'll ring me and say, could you come on the podcast? And I'll go, yeah, sure. Right? Because I've now got spaces. I've got, it's like Tetris. I can move some stuff around. Or a customer, a prospect rings up and says, can we meet? And I go, we can. I was going to do strategy on Friday, but I'll meet you for lunch, because if it's a good enough opportunity. Or somebody else says, could you do a day's delivery? It's like, I could do a day's delivery because I've got a day a week in the diary, and I could decide that because I do enough planning. I've got a gap, whereas everybody else I know, they've got like a meeting and a gap and a meeting and a gap it's not like they're booked out 100% of the time. It's all in bits, and it's just like squeeze it up. Work really hard to squeeze it up. Give yourself a day. Just write in the diary. Don't fucking book anything here or you're fired. And it'll still be there.
And tell us, Dom, they get to that day.
No, don't.
Pull into the office. They get there at 9 o'clock.
They make fucking office. Somebody will talk to you. No, don't do that.
Stay at home.
Go and find some other third space. Don't stay at home. Get out of the house. go somewhere, get a desk at a co-working space where nobody knows you, and that you have no desire to make friends, or, lots of clients have sort of, London club things that they do, and go there, spend the day there, or go to Starbucks. That's fine too.
Okay, so they found a third space away from other people, away from distractions. They get there, they have their cup of coffee, they open their laptop, they've got their diary, whatever it looks like for them.
Don't open your laptop, because that would mean you probably start doing email, and then 2 hours later.
Okay, they're sat with nothing. My point is, Dom, I just need to know, like, what's the first thing? What do they start on?
You could do worse than reading Scaling Up, right? That would be, Scaling Up's great. Rockefeller Habits is great. This book by Jack Stack, Great Game of Business. Oh, I love that. It's great. So I read books. Maybe you go for a run and listen to an audiobook, and you do two things at once. You get fitter, and you have a think about your business. Go and have lunch with a client. That would be great too. If you've got a business partner, both read a chapter of a book and then get together in the afternoon and go, like, what are we going to do about this? That would be fab. Or, there's so much great content online. Sit down and do. I mean, I love, I love to certify on tools, and so I'm constantly doing courses, or I'll do some stuff on Udemy. I love learning new things.
Wonderful. Okay, cool. And before we tap out of this podcast, my one question that I ask to everybody at the end, and I'd love to get your opinion on, is what does beautiful business mean to you?
Do you know what? I'm going to go back to the thing I said earlier, because you said, is it just profit? And I think if people have got those three interlocking circles, if you're doing something you love doing, you'll be in flow. You'll be 10 times more productive. You'll be enjoying yourself. You'd have no desire to retire. If you've got something that's driving your economic engine, it'll be making you loads of money, and you'll have financial freedom. And then if you are best in the world at something, if you're really well positioned, then attracting new business will also be, it's never easy, but it won't be hard. And then it feels like you've got a great business that you love working in, that's sustainable and profitable. Be great. Sounds great.
That's so great. And you've given us some really practical advice today. So thank you so much. We've absolutely loved having you on here.
Chloe, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to the Beautiful Business Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please remember to subscribe and leave us a review. For more advice and practical tips on what it's really like to build a beautiful business, visit our content hub at wowco.uk/hub, or check out the link in the show notes.